Welcome to this edition of Hampton Roads Focus. Our special guest this morning is Audra Bullock. Audra is the president of Norfolk Friends of Foster Care, a private partnership with the city. Is that social services?
Yes.
Okay.
Norfolk Norfolk Department of Human Services.
And you guys, I guess the big thing is you go out and you try and talk folks into being foster parents?
Yeah, there's a shortage of foster parents, particularly in Norfolk, but in Hampton Roads in general. And there are not enough beds for the kids that are coming into care. And when there are not beds for them in family homes, then the kids end up in beds in group homes or residential facilities or even detention homes.
So a kid can be taken from their home in the middle of the night, and if there's no beds, end up in detention home?
In a rare circumstance, but yes, if there's not a bed, because there's imminent danger to the child at the time of removal from their home, and they have to put the children somewhere.
Yeah. Wow.
It's tragic.
That's heartbreaking that a kid could go from having a home, even dysfunctional home,
right,
to being in detention, having done nothing wrong.
That's right. And they don't want to leave their home by and large. I mean, no matter how bad the circumstance is, it's still your family. It's still what you know.
Yeah.
And then to be taken away from that and put in a strange environment, even if it is a family environment, is difficult. But when it's not a family environment and you don't have, warm, comforting people around you, it's disorienting and damaging, to say the least.
Now, how long have you guys been around?
We're relatively new. We just incorporated as a nonprofit in June of 2016.
Okay.
My husband and I are foster parents, and we've been fostering for a little over 2 years now.
All right. So what did you do before you got into foster care?
So I was an engineer of all things.
Really?
Electrical engineer, yes. I was working for NASA and became a foster parent in 2015 and decided that there's a lot more need there and I could make a bigger impact in that world than I could as an engineer for NASA.
So you went from being kind of like the Hidden Figures lady to foster care.
Yeah, it was a big move. It was scary, I will say that, but my heart is completely committed in this, and I wake up every day knowing that I'm doing something that is of purpose bigger than myself, and hopefully will last for generations.
Now, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned you have a foster child.
I do. I have one adopted son that I adopted out of foster care, and I have another foster daughter currently with me. I have another foster daughter that has returned to her family, and we're happy to see that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great.
That's got to be heartwarming.
It is. It's bittersweet. I miss when I miss her when I don't see her every day. But I am grateful for the chance to have gotten to know her and to have helped her out in a time of need and supported her family. And we have a great relationship with their family. And like with my adopted son, his family, his extended family, is now part of my family. We get together for holidays and birthdays, and it's great.
That's cool.
It's really cool. It's a good experience.
Now, if somebody wants to make a contribution to your organization, it's Norfolk Friends of Foster Care, and do you have a website?
Yes, we do. It's norfolkffc.org.
Okay.
And we partner with the Norfolk Department of Human Services, and we service children that are in the Norfolk court system that come through the Department of Human Services. Now, being a Norfolk-based organization and serving Norfolk children, our services really do span the Hampton Roads area, and as far as Richmond, even though these kids come in through the Norfolk court system and originally lived in Norfolk, they get placed in foster homes throughout Hampton Roads.
Really? Mm-hmm. All over the region, regardless of what city they're from?
Well, we have licensed foster parents through agencies like the Up Center and the Barry Robinson Center and Families First that license in the Hampton Roads cities. And if the Norfolk Department of Human Services either needs a therapeutic home, they go with a therapeutic agency that might have a home, let's say in Virginia Beach, or if there's not a Norfolk home available for the child when they come into care, then they place with one of these agencies.
So they could be in Chesapeake or Emporia or Richmond, or wherever there's an opening.
Exactly. And in fact, we have as many children in Norfolk as we do in Chesapeake and Virginia Beach. So really, and as far as Richmond, like you said, we provide tutoring services, and one of our young ladies that we tutor is in Richmond.
Wow. Yeah. Now, you mentioned the tutoring services. What other services do you do for the kids?
So we try with our services, we have 4, to bridge the gaps that exist in the system right now. And one of the primary gaps is in education. Foster children are unfortunately the worst performing academic group in the nation. So we provide the tutoring to help overcome academic struggles that result from being removed from the home, changing school systems, moving from foster home to foster home, unfortunately.
When children go through any kind of change in the family, a divorce,
right,
the grades tend to drop off. I know.
Right. It's trauma. They're suffering, and school doesn't stop to let them suffer. It keeps on moving, and a lot of foster kids will end up in these moves, becoming grade levels behind on reading and math skills.
Well, no family encouragement, no family, no help with homework.
Right.
And
the tragedy of moving.
The trauma of that.
It's really difficult on our kids. They also miss out on a lot of things that normal kids get to do, extracurricular activities, sports after
no transportation
school.
Or after school because they can't get there.
Yeah, and they're new to a school system. They might move in the middle of the year, and so there's a priority in a foster family and when you're in foster care on addressing therapeutic needs, the trauma associated with coming into care, the abuse, the neglect. But then the normal aspects of a childhood don't necessarily take front seat. So one of the programs we have is to fund extracurricular activities and encourage foster parents, facilitate even foster parents getting these kids into activities after school that keep these kids off the streets, to keep them engaged and in contact with organic kind of mentors like coaches, and frankly get their minds off of the stress of their
there
lives.
You go.
Yeah. We partnered with the YMCA of Hampton Roads to do this, and it's an unprecedented relationship that we have where we're providing, in concert with the YMCA, monthly membership to our teens in foster care where the membership is theirs. And so if they move from one home to another, the
they still have their membership.
Goes with them. That's right. Before now, it was tied to the foster family or the family that they were with.
Yeah.
But they get and the neat thing about it that I love is that the Ys allowed us to define their family as the family that they're with. So if they're with a foster family, the foster family can be part of their family membership, but they're still the primary.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's
literally their membership.
Theirs.
A little pride there for the children.
And the Y, of course, is a great environment for
is.
kids to be in, especially teens developing leadership skills.
And having some place to go where it's a healthy atmosphere and literally people are concentrating on good health. That's and doing physical things, which is always a big plus for kids because they need that outlet.
They do need the outlet. They do. It's important. And studies have shown that kids that participate in extracurricular activities perform better on the SAT. And it's because they're building skill sets that are not taught in the classroom, but that are still important to reasoning and problem solving. So it's a great, I'm thrilled with the partnership that we forged with the YMCA.
I've met so many people here in this area, and recently we had the folks in from Virginia Beach connect with a Wish.
Yes, that's a great organization.
It's very similar. The tales they were telling me about what they do with the children and how the children are affected. The removal from a home in the middle of the night is something that I hadn't even thought about.
Yeah.
With foster children. Suddenly they're uprooted, displaced, and as you mentioned, it wasn't their idea to leave.
No.
And suddenly they're someplace other than the home they're used to.
Right. And often
and sometimes for good reason.
Right, yes. There's always a founded case when the children are removed, but it's a scary thing for the kids. They don't know where they're going. Often the removal is by force, and they don't know what to expect when they do get a family placement. these are strangers. They don't know, what the
Right.
routines are, if there are any biological kids in the home, what they're like, if they're friendly, if they're not, what the customs are. They don't get their own food. All of the things that make you comforted about being at home, it's all gone.
It's all not there.
And it's all
yeah.
a mystery, and they don't know how long they're going to be in care either. And unfortunately, that's not anything anyone can answer. It's a custody case. Foster care is an ongoing custody case, and so it has to play out in the court system, and that takes time.
And if someone wants to make a contribution to you, it's norfolkffc.org.
Yes.
And they visit that website. They can find out more about the organization, the Friends of Foster Care.
Right. There's a donate button right there.
Okay. See, that's smart. That's well, those websites are just wonderful. But I've had folks come in that weren't set up to take donations, which is really unfortunate. And for something as important as what you're doing, I'm so glad to hear that you can. Now, you had an event here pretty recently, a big gala, and I was looking at one of the posters from that, just cracked me up. It was the Foster Care Aware in end of May.
Right.
And they have this big poster with Superman with his hands on his belt. Superman had foster parents.
It's true.
That is just such a great tagline and a great advertising venue or thing to use.
That's right. It proves even superheroes need heroes.
Yep.
And the foster parents among us are heroes. They step in and in the time of need for a child, and they give their hearts. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's so rewarding. I can tell you it's the most rewarding thing that I've ever done, and I can't imagine not doing it, thinking about, where my foster children would be without me having stepped in, where my son would be, and being without him. So I think it's great. And Foster Care Aware, this was our first Foster Care Aware event, where we brought all the cities together to try and celebrate foster care, raise awareness, and recruit new foster families, because we always need new foster families. It is a pool that continually needs replenishing. People, when they foster, you can't foster forever. For one, you don't.
Yeah, the kids do grow up after a while.
It can be trying. And then people end up adopting kids sometimes, and their house gets full. And so there's a big attrition rate to being a foster parent. So we always need more foster parents, and we need good quality homes, stable homes that really have the capacity to care for these kids and do right by them. We really want to get away from the stigma, the kind of ugly face of foster care, that there are a bunch of people out there doing it for the money. One, if you ever know anybody who fosters, I can tell you that unequivocally they'll say, if that's how you're earning $1, you don't know the value of $1.
Yeah, I haven't met anyone who's doing it for the money.
Yeah.
The foster parents that I've come in contact with have been just... the reward is so much greater than monetary to start with.
And the stipends that come along with these kids really just meet their very basic needs.
Bare minimum, yeah.
Which is why we have the programs that we do that partner with the city, because the public resources only go so far. This isn't one of the government programs that gets a whole lot of money every year. And really when there are shortfalls, it's the kids that suffer. And so we're trying to bring some private funds to the table so that we can help fill those gaps. But one of our primary goals is to make sure that we're recruiting foster families, good quality foster families, and educating them on how to do foster care in a way that you survive. Most people say to me, well, I could not do that because I couldn't give them back. But that's really the wrong lens to look through.
Right.
You've got to look through the lens of the child and understand that it's not about you. It's about helping that child make it through a difficult time and forge a relationship with that child for the rest of their life. Often, I think the stigma around doing it for the money comes from when kids are constantly moved in and out of certain homes, and there isn't that relationship. Well, in moving in and out of those homes, those kids don't get to heal. They don't get the love. Everybody deserves the love of a family and the forever kind of love of a family. Whether our kids, our biological kids, eventually go on and move on to their own lives.
That's kind of the point of the exercise. Get them ready for living on their own. Yeah.
And these foster kids will do that in many instances too, because reunification is always the goal with biological family. But if you maintain a good relationship with the child and you're doing it for them and you help their family, most often you can maintain that relationship for a lifetime, which is really the point. That is what makes a good foster home.
Yeah, instead of just shuffling the kids through, a chance to really make a difference and have long-term relationship there.
Right, exactly.
If you're just joining us this morning, our guest is Audra Bullock, who is the president of Norfolk Friends of Foster Care. And this is just the most amazing program.
Thank you.
We've gone over your mission and, your recent fundraiser. You plan to do that again next year, hopefully in the spring?
Absolutely. Okay. So it's held in May every year going forward.
Okay.
In honor of National Foster Care Month.
Which is May.
Yes. It's the counterpart of National Adoption Month, which is in November. And so there's a push to get foster parents that will foster as well as adopt, because the part of the permanency, these kids, sometimes, unfortunately, they cannot return to their biological family for whatever reasons, and they need a permanent home. And in my humble opinion, the best mantra is first placement, last placement. They come into foster care, they should stay with the one family, and if they need to stay with that family forever, I hope that family would be in a position to adopt them. So that's really our crux, our push, is first placement, last placement, because a child moving from home to home to home is not a child well served by the system.
Yeah, my mom was in 3 orphanages and half a dozen foster homes when she was growing up. And I know the kind of scars it left for her, mentally and in some instances, unfortunately, physically. But that was like during the Depression or following the Great Depression, and a very long time ago. But still, the stigma of being passed around for the money in some instances, or being stuck in an orphanage where you don't want to be there, they don't really want you there. The other kids don't want you there because that's one more mouth to feed. But it's a different time, but the same problems are still there.
Yeah, they persist, and it's really hard to pull yourself out of that circumstance and not let it define you. In that when you go, you survive that kind of environment, you go and have your own family, you don't have really the skill sets to serve your family very well, and you repeat cycles. That's a common problem in foster care. It's without stable families coming in and showing by example, how to be a family.
Yeah.
The kids aren't going to know, and they grow up and they have kids of their own, and unfortunately they come into care, and the cycle starts all over again. And they're not just having one kid; they're having multiple. Yeah, children.
Multiple children, and sometimes with multiple fathers and mothers, and yeah. That is a subject for a whole other show. But the focus on foster care and foster parents, I just can't say enough about the work you folks in the Norfolk Friends of Norfolk Foster Care have done. And we were talking earlier about the academic performance or lack thereof of the children, and I know. In our family, when my oldest daughter was young, we went through a divorce, and it was a real struggle with her grades just fell off. I mean, from a very good student down to really subpar. And a lot of that had to do with readjusting to a single-parent household. And I know how hard I worked at it, and it's still. So when you have people that aren't working at it at all, and the children are just kind of in a caretaker situation, that's very discouraging for them.
It is, and they really don't have a means then to support themselves after they do get out of school. If they're not performing well in school and or they get socially promoted and they happen to graduate from high school, they're ill prepared for college. The statistics are abysmal. They're the foster kids are the worst performing academic group in the nation. It starts if you've ever just been in care, whether you go back to your biological family or you get adopted.
Just the virtue of being in care.
Being in care, the trauma associated with that affects academic performance, taking a national average of graduation, high school graduation rate from about 89 to 90% down to 50%. Just if you've touched
Seriously,
the system.
almost cuts it in half, the
Yes.
graduation rate, just by
yes.
being in care, not...
Right. And if you are unfortunate enough to stay in care a prolonged period of time and are in care at graduation, there are only 25% of those kids that are graduating from high school. And so if you think about, exiting care, aging out, meaning that you grow up in foster care and at the time you turn 18, you now have aged out of the system.
That's the other thing, aging out.
Right.
I've heard about that in the past and how traumatic that is for the kids that aren't adopted because their foster parents no longer receive a stipend.
Right.
So it's at their good graces whether you stay or just hit the street with
nothing.
I
mean, there are trainings to try and make these youth self-sufficient, but how self-sufficient can you be without any support at all? And these kids literally have nobody. I will tell you it. When they age out, you're facing, 25% of that population will end up homeless within 4 years. Another 25 will end up incarcerated. Another 25 will end up on welfare. So 75% of those kids are
not
struggling.
productive members of society.
Not productive members of society.
75%.
75. Yeah, percent. And so then if you flip it and say, okay, let's look at who's successful coming out of that, who is able to pull themselves up by the bootstraps in that dreadful situation, it's only 3% that are going on to get college degrees. So it's not okay what these kids are what is happening to these kids because they have brain power, they have abilities, they really lack the structure around them to support them in those things. If we think about our own lives, if you're left with nobody to call in the middle of the night when you trying to get into college or you need a place to stay, you're going to turn to the streets. It's a terrible fate, and most of our kids don't make it very well out of that. So we're trying to bridge those gaps. We're trying to, with our tutoring program, we provide one-on-one private tutoring that's in the home, and we pay our tutors very well. And the reason that we do this, it's not a volunteer program that we run. We do that so that we have accountability, that we have well-qualified tutors that are able to deal with behavioral issues, because along with that trauma come a lot of behavioral issues.
The lack of social interaction.
Well, social interaction and lack of trust. These children don't trust anyone because they've been failed, by at several points throughout their lives, especially if they've moved home after home. There's very little that you trust after that. So we have accountability for our tutors. We have top-notch people, and we're working to get these kids back on grade level because most of them are falling way behind in math and reading, and without being able to read, you're never going to get through school.
And the math aspect, if you can't, the old days you had to balance a checkbook. Well, now you can do that with a calculator on your phone. However, understanding the math process that takes you there, and that if you have X number of dollars coming in and more go out, you're in trouble.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And just simple math, and that's something that everybody needs.
Everybody needs, and it's a requisite
problem
for college
solving.
And college post-secondary education for these kids really, I think, is the way out of those awful statistics of being in that 75% of the kids that aren't ending up well.
That is just hard to believe. I wonder what the national average for kids that have never been in foster care is.
for high school.
For going on to college.
I think it's well in the 30s, 30%.
Which is just remarkable.
Yeah.
Not everyone needs college.
Not everyone needs college.
I'm a firm believer in that, but everyone needs higher education or some type of training, an apprentice program, something that picks up. Because I it's funny, but I can still remember the anxiety involved with turning 18 and knowing that, okay, your whole life is ahead of you. Is no more high school. If you're lucky enough, college awaits or military training, but it's that next step, and that's such an anxious period for male or female.
Right.
Wow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then face it, without a family, it's almost
without that support group. Right. Yeah, that most of us just kind of take for granted.
Right.
Those of us that are from warm, loving families, supportive. Right. People behind you, encouraging you and saying, hey, you can do anything.
That's right.
Not everyone has that.
No, not everyone has that. And these foster kids are woefully missing that. And that's what we're hoping to bring to the table. And so each year in May, just like you asked, we are doing a recruiting event to try and make sure that the pool of foster parents is continually replenished, so that these kids always do have a family option.
Now, if someone is even considering becoming a foster parent, they should go to the website, learn more.
That's right.
They can contact you through the website.
Absolutely.
If you'd just like to help, make a contribution. The give button is there.
It is.
And that is NorfolkFFC.org. And that's pretty easy. Yeah. Norfolk FFC, Friends of Foster Care .org. And you can make a contribution to not just a child's life, but to society in general.
Right.
It's such a huge help.
That's right.
I remember when we used to have physics class, which taught civics class, which taught us about being a good citizen and taking part. And I don't think they even do that now, and that's so sad.
Yeah.
Because we all are a part of the society that we live in, and
that's exactly right.
We need to be civil to one another.
That's exactly right. And it takes the community coming together. It's all well intentioned for the government to have these programs, so that the safety net, but it takes more than that. It takes the community coming together to support our friends and neighbors in order for all the boats to float on that rising tide.
And I don't think anybody would argue with the fact that social services in every city across this great country are woefully underfunded.
Yes.
And way, way overworked.
That's
the
right.
volume that they're expected to, and it ends up being a shuffling through rather than a taking time to look for the right placement for a child.
That's right. They don't have time there's not enough time in the day to be advocates for each one of these kids, although their hearts are absolutely in the corner
right place,
for these kids. They just simply don't have time because of the volume. And if you think about it this way, foster care becomes cyclical. When a child grows up in foster care and they don't have a family around them, they go to have their own family, they're going to end up without the skill sets to raise that family. And their children often will be taken from them, and that grows exponentially. A child has two children, and those two children go into care, and those two children have multiple kids. You can see how it keeps growing.
Up in care, yeah.
So stopping it by providing one child some stability makes a big impact later down the road.
Well, I want to thank you for coming by this morning and encourage all of you listening to help out the Norfolk Friends of Foster Care. That's Norfolk, the word, and then ffc.org. You can find out more about the organization, make a contribution there. And Audra Bullock, the president and founder of this organization, thank you so much. And
thank you, Mike.
We've got just a little over a minute or so left. You were talking about doing things with the kids, that you have camperships, and there's a birthday program that you have that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's right. So through our partnership with the YMCA, we offer camp programs, summer camps to kids. These are the top-notch summer camps, Red Feathers, Silver Beach, that all the kids want to go to. Yes, and so we offer that. And our crux is, or our theme is, to have siblings that are placed in separate households, because siblings don't always get placed together when they come into foster care, to have a week together, to spend
that is
and,
so cool.
and encourage the family bonds, because it's not always mandated by the court that they get visitation. And then the birthday project is making sure that every kid on their birthday has a birthday gift, because there are kids that come into care and end up remembering the one birthday that they never got anything because they were in foster care. And so, more than making an impact of getting toys, we're preventing that
bad memory being
That's
there.
exactly right.
Thanks so much for your work. Our guest again, Audra Bullock, President, Norfolk Friends of Foster Care. That's norfolkffc.org if you'd like to make a contribution, and I think you should. Thank you so much for tuning in this morning and this edition of Hampton Roads Focus.